It's time to set the record queer. And no, we won't have to fix it in post. Welcome to Setting the Record Queer, a podcast where queer people talk about the pursuits and communities they love. This is episode 20, and it's about animation post-production. My name is Alexis, my pronouns are it, its, or she, her, and I'm two of your hosts.
My name's Kaylee, I'm your other host, and my pronouns are she, her.
20 whole episodes, that's a lot. But yeah, how outside of doing 20 episodes of a podcast, Kaylee, how are things going?
Pretty close to the end of rewriting the record. I think for those of you listening to this right now, I'm not promising this, but I think it'll be out on the week after you hear this episode. I think that's
I think so.
I think that's correct. We're going to release it on an off week when we don't normally have something, so it'll probably be 1 week from today when you hear this.
Probably.
So that's coming up. So I'm
the
excited.
rewriting the record projects are going real smooth. I am super excited to record the episode talking about them. I have learned a lot this month, to say the least, and I'm very excited about all of that.
I've put so much work into mine.
Yeah, you have been practically working full-time job amounts of hours between rewriting the record and doing your own personal works. Speaking of your own personal works, how's SoulSync going?
I spent it was a culmination of a month of work, but I finally put a terrible pun about eggs on the SoulSync Twitter account.
By which Kaylee means that she made the dialogue system happen and work, and she made all of the face sprites, of course, but she also made
not from
really
scratch. All of
pun.
that was based on open source materials, but I don't want to take credit for stuff I didn't do. Made a terrible egg pun after a culmination of a month of work.
Pretty good. What else is going on in our lives? We bought wedding dresses today.
Yeah, that was
exciting. It was an extremely stressful process. We got there and we didn't spend too much money. I don't know. I saw Kaylee and she looked real pretty.
Oh, you weren't supposed to see me. I'm kidding. We didn't do that tradition.
Yeah, we wanted to go wedding dress shopping together because we're lesbians. Obviously. Yeah, but I don't know. I guess, needless to say, I am excited about... I like her a lot, though, is kind of my point. And finally, Power Up with Pride 2019 is very, very quickly approaching.
It's this weekend from when this airs. In fact, there should be some pre-marathon content up right now on the channel.
The main event is going to be June 7th through 9th, and on the couple of days, I think Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, leading up to the event, there's going to be content up on the channel, sort of building up to the main event itself. We're putting a lot into making Power Up with Pride even better this year, so be excited. I think that's everything that's happening in our lives. So now, as is tradition here on Setting the Record Queer, as we've nailed down over the course of 20 whole episodes, we now transition from the part of the podcast where we talk about our boring lives into the part where we talk to someone much more interesting about their much more interesting life. So, hi, Therese.
Hi, I am Therese Amunitigui. Pronouns are they, them, and I'm a musician. And my day job is as the post and music cue assistant at Cartoon Network.
That title is so cool. Therese, why don't you give us a rundown of what it is exactly that you do at Cartoon Network?
I was hired to do the music cues. So what I have to do is I have to track every piece of music that is played or that's scored on top of an episode. Composers give me a list of all the cues, who wrote them, how long they are, when they occur, and I input them in a system, and that gets them paid royalties whenever those episodes are aired. I have to watch everything at the studio. So I'm basically the studio's biggest fan because I've seen everything. But it requires me to make sure that all the cues are accounted for, that everything is accurate, just staying in touch with the productions and the composers whenever I have questions. Also, on top of that, I assist in the post department, so I do the assistant work or paperwork that needs to be done that's not being handled by the post manager. So I like pass out checks, I collect timesheets, I help schedule birthdays and stuff. I have the contact list. It's basically like day to day is really different. And I also help with delivering promotional materials and tracking QC reports. It's just a bunch of office work, basically.
You do a lot then. I was not expecting the list to be that long.
Well, the thing about
That's impressive.
production is that we're the people behind the scenes that take care of all the grunt work. So everything that's not creative, we take care of that. Like I said, checks, tracking things. I have to track all the songs at the studio, so we could later like put them up on iTunes or whatever when the episodes air. It's just a lot.
And it's also, I feel like it's kind of like a noble thing. I mean, you're the one who makes sure people gets paid, which is like pretty cool.
Yeah.
Where we live in a world that harshly devalues creative work and has tons of problems just paying people easily. You make that happen, and that's pretty cool in my IMO. So let's get into your history and like what led you up to position. So I think if my guesstimation is correct, I would have to guess that this all starts with music for you. That be correct?
Yes. Actually, since I was in high school, I wanted to be an independent musician. Went to school for music composition and got a minor in film production. When I was in college, I took a bunch of internships. And it eventually led me to gain an internship at Nickelodeon. After I graduated, I was just working retail for 2 years until I eventually met someone at DreamWorks. Worked at DreamWorks for a year and a half, and then realized I wanted something that more to my interest, me more like along the path of eventually doing music professionally. So a job at Cartoon Network eventually popped up that just said music assistant. They saw my resume and they saw that I already was one of the few applicants that not only had music experience, but had animation experience already. And so they kind of shaped the job around my resume somehow. I'm like probably one of the only people I know that got a job at Cartoon Network by applying online and not knowing anybody. So that's how I eventually got there. It's just, I went to a lot of conventions. I met a lot of people, went to a lot of like gatherings and whatnot, asked questions at panels. All those like were like little things that led up to getting there. And then from all the conventions and stuff that I went to, it was really weird because I like my first few weeks walking around at Cartoon Network, it was like, hey, we've met before, like just talking to certain people. And it was prior to me working in animation. And it's just like weird how like I ended up running into people at Cartoon Network from back before I was even in animation at all.
Out of curiosity, how much nostalgia do you have for cartoons and specifically Cartoon Network?
A lot. When I was younger, I really didn't care that much about live action. That's even me now. I mean, I do like some certain live action things, but I watched a lot of Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and all that stuff. I was really into Pokemon. I'm still really into Pokemon. I was really obsessed with the Powerpuff Girls when I was a kid and like Invader Zim and, you know, a bunch of different stuff.
How do you think childhood you would react to finding out that future them works for Cartoon Network?
It blows my mind because I was so into the Powerpuff Girls when I was a kid, and seeing my name on the Powerpuff Girls reboot is just like that's just like crazy to me. Or like that I'm working with people who worked on the things that I liked as a kid, and it's just like no big deal. It's just like, I don't know, I have boring interactions with like the most amazing people every day. Like today, I was talking with somebody who's like one of the showrunners, and we were just talking about the water filtration systems just on the floor we were on, because there's like different places to get water. It's just like really surreal sometimes, because I'm like, wow, everybody's just so normal now. I'm just like not phased. I don't know.
So I guess let's move into talking a little bit more about like the work you do. You already gave us like a great rundown of all of your responsibilities, so I don't think we need to even come back to that.
So, what other skills would you say go into the job?
I mean, going to the job, I knew a little bit about music licensing, so that helps me determine like who should get credit for what and when they should get credit for things. So it's helped me like make sure that people get paid. That's been cool. And I don't know, just like I'm not around a lot of like musicians or people whose specialty is music. So a lot of the times I'm the go-to person. Like I had somebody call me because they needed lead sheets, basically like lyrics and chords. That's all it is. That way, someone could improvise or like just play it or whatever. But I had a producer call me and ask what a lead sheet was because they knew that I'd be able to figure it out, even though that's like not normally what I do. It was just like, oh, well, yeah, of course I'm going to know what a lead sheet is. Like, I know music. So, like, sometimes I'm kind of a go to with information like that. Like, not all the time. It's not like crazy, but occasionally.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a job that's just very, you have to be resourceful and kind of on your feet, is the impression I'm getting.
I wouldn't say I have to be on my feet. It's more like I just have to log a lot of stuff and be really accurate in the things that I do.
Well, cool. I guess let's move on then to talking about kind of the community surrounding your work. I get the feeling that there's not exactly going to be like a music production assistance community out there. The rather specialized nature of what you do. So, in terms of your work, I guess like what kind of community do you surround yourself with?
At work, I talk to a lot of non-binary people, like just straight up. And I talk to a lot of artists. I talk to a lot of people who are just in regular production. And then outside of work, I talk to a lot of people who are into like game music and stuff. So through all of that, I've been able to like, I don't know, build a community that's or not build a community, but kind of be a part of like different communities that intersect both media and music and people who are on the spectrum in terms of gender. And
Yeah, you kind of got at the answer to my next question there, talking about like being queer in this sort of space. So you've already said that you sort of like try to find and surround yourself with the other queer folk that you can find around. I guess beyond just that, how is being queer in this sort of field? Has it posed any challenges or any opportunities even, or is it really just kind of you're too busy doing your job anyways that it doesn't really end up being a deal?
in post production, it's kind of weird because like there's an age gap between me and everybody else I work with. There aren't that many people who share like like who aren't white. Post is different because there's like obviously a generational gap, but like around the studio, it's pretty easy to see other people that are like similar. I think the only thing that like makes me feel off sometimes is that I'm the only like one of the few people working in the industry that's actually from LA and everybody around me isn't from LA. So that's probably the only thing that's kind of like weird to me, but like I don't feel like I'm really ostracized or I feel out of place as a non-binary person at Cartoon Network. Like it's a pretty accepting studio.
Honestly, not super surprised to hear that, given specifically with Cartoon Network. They've been doing really well lately. It's really I have no idea what's going on internally, obviously, but it's really good to see some of those shows that have been showing up and where they've been going with a lot of Cartoon Network stuff. So I'm glad to hear that that's reflected internally, I guess.
I think also because boundaries were pushed at the studio to include queer content, I think that has caused an influx of queer people to start applying and being hired there. So it's kind of like the content came first, and because of that, more and more you're seeing like a variety of different faces. I feel like it still hasn't really reached like the top as much, but it's definitely there, like the mid-level positions and stuff.
That's really awesome, yeah.
Yeah, supposedly we're like the best one out of everywhere. I mean, a lot of change still needs to happen, but that's what I heard. I don't know. I don't know the
Well,
validity of it, but
from an outsider's perspective, I would definitely believe it. As someone who watches a lot of cartoons.
that's good. I'm glad that you watch a lot of cartoons.
We do.
What's your favorite one from the studio?
Network. Okay, my favorite childhood one was probably Dexter's Lab, but I think my favorite one, like, since I don't know, I really liked Steven Universe, Adventure Time, and Regular Show.
Yeah,
they're all really good,
Adventure Time's a crazy one because
and they're all done now.
it actually made me get back into watching cartoons, and then it actually inspired me to like pursue getting a career in animation production, and then I ended up on it, and that was like a really crazy feeling, especially because I was really into Rebecca Sugar's episodes of Adventure Time, and then to like have the opportunity to work on both Adventure Time and Steven Universe was like I said, a really surreal experience. And I'm still, well, Steven's still going on with the movie and stuff, but
There's a movie?
yes,
I didn't
there
hear
is.
about that.
It's not out yet, but yeah, that's
That's
already
exciting.
been announced, so I can say that.
I guess here's kind of a random question that I know is something I've dealt with in the past, doing really unrelated stuff. Does keeping secrets ever get hard when you work on, especially because you work on something that you're so clearly passionate about?
They're not hard in the way you would think they're hard. They're not hard in like I have a hard time keeping them. They're hard in that they torture me internally. Like right now, see this face. People listening can't see this face, but I feel just bogged down all the time with all these emotions I have. Like if I'm freaking out online about something, like surface level, it looks like I'm freaking out about something that just aired, but I'm probably freaking out about something that's going to air in a year. So
That's
And-
how far in advance this stuff goes?
sometimes I think the longest I've had to wait out a freak out was probably like 10 months or something.
Jeez, I couldn't handle that.
And my like the time from when I learned that, can I say a Steven Universe spoiler on here? So the time from
Let's just skip ahead like 15
spoiler
seconds
warning.
if you're not caught
Skip
up.
ahead if you don't want to hear this, I guess.
okay, from the time
We'll drop a timestamp to skip in the show notes.
sorry. So learning that Rose Quartz and Pink Diamond were like the same person, that was probably almost a year for me waiting on that. And the like main crew probably knew that like way before me. So like when I experience information, I'm experiencing it in a bubble where I freak out alone because nobody else is working around me on this, and I'm just like ah.
Okay, well, we are safe from spoilers, though. Yeah, that seems tough. I couldn't do that. So if I admire you and your work for nothing else, it's holding that stuff in, because Kaylee could probably attest to the fact that I am absolutely horrible at not saying things.
I don't know. You did a pretty good job when you were doing that sort of stuff that required secrets. Like you wouldn't even like tell me some of the stuff that was going into some of the stuff you used to work on.
Maybe I undervalued
You would come in, you would come to bed and you would talk about like how you worked on something really cool and you wanted to talk about it but you couldn't, and that would be the end of the conversation.
Yeah, that sounds like something.
The reason why it's a lot easier to keep these secrets is that there's so many. There's so many at all times that I don't know. It's like, you know, when you see like a monster trying to get through an like open door and it can't because it's too big. Like that's what the secrets are like. They're just like they can't get through that
So what
door.
you're saying is I'm invincible. Come, Smithers.
Do you ever, I guess just to continue down this massive tangent, do you ever just like lose track of what's out or not?
I'm pretty good about it. I just Google things. That's it. I use Google at work too, like because sometimes I need to like get something for an episode. And I'm like, is that episode out yet? Is this priority? I need to check. But I'd say I'm pretty good about knowing when things are out or not. I also like follow a lot of creators and like artists and stuff on the Twitter, so I'm pretty good about this.
Color me incredibly impressed.
So, what events are coming up in your line of work that you can talk about?
Cartoon Network wise, or like my actual like music work, because I do that like that's my
Really?
second job.
Really anything, just like what's happening in your communities. If there's in particular, if there's anything like people tend to gather up for, whether in Cartoon Network or not.
By the time this podcast comes out, I
What game
did a
is
song
it?
on a game, and that game came out May 29th, called Don't Wake the Night, and it's about witchcraft and queer witches.
Sounds great. I'm sold.
Yeah, I'll send it. It's also related to the song too. Also, I'm going to be playing shows in the summer, playing this one called INOL, and it's an experimental music fest. I'm also playing at the OC Fair for the second year in a row, doing my music set. And those are a few events coming up. I'm eventually going to have an EP out. I keep saying I'm going to have it out in the spring, but it's like been a little delayed, so that should be coming up in the next few months.
Another common thread between episodes: releasing albums hard.
It totally is, especially because like I work a full-time job, so like I'm working 2 jobs, so there's delays all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't release albums, but I do know how that is.
Oh,
In general, I'm still between jobs right now.
oh.
Not important.
So if someone's looking to break into the field of like production or like getting into these animation studios or anything like that, what advice would you have for them on like how to get started?
The advice I have is probably not going to be one that's very popular, and I'm not sure how much I really stand by it. But the way it worked for me was that I did a lot of unpaid internships, like a lot. I was desperate to make it in. Talking to a lot of people online and going to conventions and stuff is a good way to make yourself known. I had it a little luckier because I'm from LA County. So, it's not much of a drive for me to go to like a women in animation mixer, whereas somebody who like lives in Idaho is probably going to have a harder time. I would just say be active on Discord, be active on whatever social media site you choose. There's probably a community there. There was this student I talked to the other day, or I talked to when I was at GDC, and I told him just try to find like a community like in your town, wherever it is, or like within a commutable distance. If you can't do it online, just meet as many people as you can, find as many friends as you can, or you can go my route, which was the unpaid internship route, but that's a lot harder, especially for people who don't have as much money. Like I had a lot of problems. So those are my ideas of doing it. Or you could also take like the Craigslist sort of like PA gigs, like that are like being a day player or whatever.
So I guess continuing along the hypothetical of, some listener who's looking to break into this field, they take that first step. Is there anything you're in there that you wish you'd known when you got started?
I was like really nice, like uncharacteristically nice to everybody. And I think it's just good to, I don't know, you don't have to be everybody's friend. And it's just simple as that. Don't feel like you have to be everybody's friend. Like you can kind of be yourself. Don't be mean to people, but also a lot of the advice you'll get is to be as nice to everyone, that everything's a networking opportunity, that, you've got to be on everybody's radar. But me personally, that did not work for me, and it actually left me with a lot of anxiety. So I would say just find your tribe, be yourself, unless yourself is mean, and then you gotta like stop being mean. But find your tribe, be the most pleasant version of yourself, and don't feel like you have to be everybody's friend and that you have to be on everybody's radar constantly. Like just make good work and find your tribe. And make that tribe be like as stable as possible.
All right. Well, Cool. With that, I guess we'll move on to our performance showcase. So for the performance showcase for this episode, Therese, you've picked out one of your musicals. So we're going to take a listen to that in a moment and then talk about, how the music skills and that sort of stuff plays into the other things you do. So Therese, why don't you give us the rundown on the piece we're about to listen to?
This song was written for the game Don't Wait the Night. It's a visual novel. It's about queer witches. It was written by Brujeria at Work. They're from Toronto. And it just explores their relationships. They're all doing some sort of ritual. And I guess there is multiple endings. The way I wrote the lyrics, it's basically about trying to find somebody that means a lot to you while also trying to figure out yourself and what the future has for you. And that's what the song is. I also try to make it as witchy as possible.
All right, well, let's take a listen.
We reach out to the dark.
I really like that. That is
Me too.
Probably the extent of my ability to think critically about music.
Well, as much as I would love to sit here and talk about the production of that song, and the listeners of this podcast know I would absolutely love to do that. Unfortunately, we literally just did a songwriting episode, and this episode is not supposed to be about that. So I would love to. We're not gonna. So let's talk instead about, I guess what I really want to talk about musically is the way that structuring a song to be put in something else in particular, or I guess especially for in this case, it was a video game or for, animation or for film, differs from the way you'd construct something for music's sake.
I think it's pretty obvious when you're creating something for a piece of media, the thing you make is a slave to that media, and you're not necessarily always going to write stuff you like. I got lucky because the game I'm writing for is goth. It's written by a person of color, somebody who's queer and not cis. And it was just really easy because of that. I was like, okay, I know this perfectly. And then I was given vague set of guidelines for the lyrics, and that worked out for me. But in other situations, you're just going to write something that's going to be slave to the picture or whatever the person wants you to write. If there's a car chase going on, you don't want something that sounds like a ballad. And if ballads are your jam, then you're probably going to have a hard time.
Tangent question. I like your music production name of TVMA. I think that's very creative. I know what that is, but where did that name come from in how you started using it?
When I was in high school, my last name was Martinez, so I was Therese Martinez. Therese, my middle name's V. TVM. And so I started using TVMA because I was like, oh, well, that'll be my music name or whatever, because it's I was a little edgy teen. And then I was like, it would be really convenient if I just married someone with an A last name so I could just change my name. And then I actually did that somehow. So my initials are actually TVMA with the hyphen in the middle. So it just worked out. It's just from edgy teen me realizing that my initials were edgy and then just doubling down on edginess. That's it. I'm just a really edgy person.
That's kind of an amazing. I was not expecting a story that was good. is what I'm saying. I how much of a factor in marrying that aforementioned person was the last name?
When I met them, it was like, wow, and I can't believe your last name's an A. Wow.
What are these 1 in 26 odds?
Yeah.
Well, it's a little higher than that,
It's
right?
a lot higher than that. Yeah, so I guess then you satisfied my want for a tangent. So getting back into the discussion of hazy future, what else did I want to talk about this? I think we might have touched on this a little bit already, but how do your music skills sort of tie into your PA work? And then also maybe vice versa. How has your PA work affected the way you work on music?
So, like I said, my music work affects my PA work because of like trying to figure out how the heck I was going to make money as a musician. I happen to know all these music related laws and ways people could get royalties off music. So it really helps me sometimes because I'm like, wait a minute. Aren't I supposed to credit this person for this thing? And then I'm the only person who caught it because like I'm so like invested in like knowing stupid music laws. And then the way my work affects my music is that I am very lucky in that I'm surrounded by creative people all day. So I don't feel like ostracized that I'm constantly locking myself up and working. So it's really helped my work ethic. Also, having to like listen down to people's music constantly gives me ideas and sees what the things that work, the things that don't work. Constantly watching how score affects what's going on the screen helps me that way too. And just being around, like, I'm around a lot of like artists that want to be musicians and who have taken the time to like try to learn more about theory and stuff. And that like inspires me to try to better myself, even though like I have a degree in this stuff. Cause I honestly didn't care as much about theory until I saw like people who didn't have a degree in it, like, wow, I want to learn more about theory. And I'm just like, oh, why do you want to learn about that? It's so structural. So yeah, that's that.
Cool. Kaylee, anything?
Just a note. I actually, funnily enough, I think that song would fit in really well with a lot of the songs that I've seen from like a lot of the Cartoon Network shows.
I'm probably kind of inspired by like the songwriting there too. Like a lot of my music leading up to like the original stuff I started composing were like fan works. Like I did an Adventure Time cover. I did a song inspired by the Jonan Vasquez comic Squee. Jonan Vasquez is the creator of Invader Zim. I did like an Undertale mashup. Like I did a lot of fan works thinking that I was going to write songs for animation. And so a lot of the stuff, like I've tried to like make mock-up songs for like imaginary cartoons or like video games or cartoons that already exist. And that's affected the way I've started writing songs. Like trying to make them like really catchy, but experimental. And also I'm a goth, so everything kind of has to sound a little goth.
I really like it. I like the songs from the Cartoon Network shows.
Yeah, they're really good.
Let's move on to our listener questions. So for every episode of this podcast, we take questions from you, our listeners, to give to our guests and to give to us. If you want to ask questions to any of our future guests, you can do so on our Twitter at strqueercast, via email settingtherecordqueer@gmail.com, or in our community Discord at bit.ly/strqcord, all lowercase. So our first question for you, Therese, comes from Kra via email, who asks, aliens teleported into your room and they need your equipment. Which piece of gear that you own would you send off to the cosmos, and which would you defend to the death?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I would not let anyone take my computer. Like, I feel like everything else I could replace, but my computer has like everything. It has like years and years of stuff. Thing I would let them take is probably like one of my controllers. Like, whatever, I could just get another controller. Like, controllers are dime a dozen. Like, don't let any EDM producer tell you otherwise. They're nonsense.
All right.
All right.
And by the way, quick shout out to the people who asked questions this week, because we made a little mistake and forgot to announce the guest early. So these people really
been a busy
came in
week,
for us.
as mentioned at the beginning of this episode. Thank you to these people.
We have one more question from Dijon Ketchup. Do the people who compose music for television generally make it based off the script, early production materials, or mostly in post-production?
Most of it is done in post-production, but it could literally happen at any point in the production. Like, I know some shows, it's in their script that it says, these are lyrics. We need to start working with our team right now to come up with stuff. So with songs, definitely a lot of the times they could happen anywhere, but when it comes to like score, that usually just happens in post-production.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that with that, it's time to move on to our final segment of the podcast, which is, as we all know and love, unless you're a first-time listener, or tune out by now, it's time for Kaylee's question of the week, which are like, I think, pretty standard, like, you know, someone gets mind controlled from some distant planet, probably the same aliens that took your audio equipment. Sorry about that. And they, like, you know, mind control a skywriter to write these in the air, specifically directed at the chosen one. But I mean, anyone can answer them. And I mean, that'll help them find the chosen one who's destined to lead the world into a great new age, but not our world. Anyway, getting off topic. So, a bit of background on this question specifically is that me and Alexis had a discussion this morning because Alexis thought it was too complicated and too difficult for a Kaylee's question of the week. But I said I don't care.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay, so this week's question, which isn't actually really a question, give an impromptu monologue from the perspective of a protagonist of a gritty reboot of a Cartoon Network show, anyone, past or present, just as a fun little game. We're going to see how long it takes the other two to figure it out, so we're each going to do this. So I think the two of us will go first to give you time to think about this, because we did pick a ridiculous one. Alexis was right.
I still have no idea what I'm doing here.
All right. Oh, this is going to be terrible. And as always, feel free to answer this question. We might read your answer on the next episode of the podcast. So feel free to write your own gritty reboot of a Cartoon Network show. Day in, day out. I build, I create, just for
It's
it all
Dexter's
to
Lab.
get destroyed.
We're done.
Damn it!
Hold on. I got this.
It's gonna end with back to the lab again.
So it's gonna be click click of a gun. Click click. Oh mama. Johnny
What?
Bravo.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh god, I'm horrible at improv. And now the pressure's on too.
Once again, the day is saved.
See, you were worried, and you're the only one having trouble.
Yeah, why do you think I was worried about this question? I mean, I'm just bad at improv is really what's happening here. I might just pass for the sake of podcast
Ooh.
go forth.
Just like talk about like Courage the Cowardly Dog. It's already written that way for you.
All right. Here's my Courage the Cowardly Dog reboot of a gritty live action. Bark, 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 bark.
Does he not talk in the reboot?
No, it's gonna be a real dog, except it's also purple. Don't worry about it. There you go. Are you happy now, Kaylee?
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm satisfied. Thank you for barking into the microphone for a few seconds.
No problem. I'm sorry I'm bad at improv.
It's okay. I'll replace you by next week.
Yeah, if anyone can come up with a better answer than I did, which is probably everyone, again, please send us the answer. We like to feature our favorite Kaylee's Question of the Week answers at the end of every episode of the podcast. So with that, I think we're pretty much done here, bringing episode 20 of Setting the Record Queer to a close. So, Therese, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a really, really interesting and enlightening episode, and I think a really good pick for the big 2020. Therese, so where can our listeners find you and your musical works on the internet?
I use Twitter too much, and I'm at TVMA Noise, or you can go to tvmanoise.com and just pick your favorite thing and just like find me there. I've got music there. There's a lot of music. Listen to my music, please.
Go listen to their music. You've now heard some of it. Go listen to more because you know it's good. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/settingtherecordqueer. Our patrons can get early guest reveals, access to a special Discord channel, high quality or early episode releases, and special thanks on the podcast. We'd like to thank our $25 patrons, Kadeho, who you can find on Twitter as @CallMeCadejo, American Choir Boy, who you can find and watch on Twitch at twitch.tv/American Choir Boy, and Violet Moon, who you can find on Twitter as @ViTheMoon. That's at VI the Moon. Thank you to all of our patrons. Would not be able to do this podcast without you. We would not be able to do stuff like rewriting the record without you, which again, we're really, really excited about. Otherwise, if you like this podcast, please subscribe on your podcast platform, maybe leave a review, tell a friend, or talk about us on your social media. If you'd like to get into contact with us, you can do so on our Twitter at STRQueercast, via email at settingtherecordqueer@gmail.com, or come join our community Discord where you can hang out with us hosts, other Setting the Record Queer listeners, and even some of our guests and production people who have decided to grace us with their presence at bit.ly/STRQcord. That's in all lowercase. While you're there, ask questions for us or for our guests, send feedback, answer this week's Kaylee's question of the week. Maybe you think you should be on this podcast, or otherwise have a good idea for who or what could be on this podcast. We always like to hear from our listeners about what they'd like to see from the podcast in the future. The logo for this podcast was drawn by Cubotic. That's at QBTIC on Twitter, or Cobot, QOBOT.tumblr.com. The theme music and production for this podcast is by Thrill Me Music. You can find more information about her work at thrillmemusic.squarespace.com. Kaylee, where can our listeners find you?
People can find me on Twitter at WitchesHex, that's WITCHS Hex, or on Twitch at the same name, but with an underscore between Witches and Hex. And if you want to see terrible cliched puns about eggs that take a month to make, you can follow SoulSync on Twitter at SoulSyncGame. That's SOULSYNC game.
How would you describe the quality of the puns? Good? Great? Maybe excellent?
I'm let that one go, but that was pretty bad.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you think that's a bad pun, huh? Yeah?
We are not going back and forth with egg puns. Plug your Twitter.
You know, fair enough. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter as Princess Proto. Find my Final Fantasy XIV character and virtual photography Instagram at echo_white. That's EKHO_white, as in the color. Our next episode is going to be about professional mariachi music, which is like something I never would have even imagined was something we would get the chance to talk about on this podcast. So I'm real excited, as usual. Episode 2021 is going to be absolutely fantastic. But with that brings 20 episodes later of Setting the Record Queer to a close. Thank you all so much for listening, and here's to 20 more.
Bye.